As far as an ending explained video for Rampage, it's completely unnecessary. For starters, there's only one flashback that I can remember in the movie, and that's a vague, couple shots of how George was met Davis. But I'll explain the ending nonetheless. So the last 5 minutes is George killing Lizzie the Lizard by stabbing a giant pole into her eye. Spoiler alert, if you didn't think that was ending explained enough. And then George pretends to die, pulling a prank on Davis, there's an emotional bit, and then all of a sudden, it turns out George is not dead, and he's alive, and there's a couple jokes, there's a sex joke between Naomi Harris and Dwayne Johnson, and then they ask the question, where are they going to keep George now? And then the film ends. It's difficult to thoroughly explain an ending that basic, but there are a couple things that are not fully explained at the end of the movie. For starters, we don't know what happened in the aftermath of the Wyden siblings' death. We don't know what happens as a result of the FBI and the OGA investigation as a whole, and we don't actually know what happens to the Energene company or Energine company overall. We don't know whether it's passed on to anyone or it's shut down. It's just left as a broken building. And it's not like all their servers are lost. They're still with the FBI, I believe. And that raises sort of a question of what happens to Energine as sort of a whole, because it's presented as a huge climbing corporation, and what would happen to its stock? I mean, they mentioned it dropping 20 points at the beginning of the movie, but there's not a whole lot more unexplained there. You'd also assume that their reputation is dragged through the mud on that, and we don't really know what happens legally going forward because of the investigations. We don't know what the world's response to George is. All people know, for the most part, at the end of that fight, is that there are 3 monsters tearing up Chicago, and they might find out that the fight ended and that the gorilla killed the crocodile and the wolf. So we don't know whether the response will be positive or negative, and there's a lot of plot holes, plot threads just missing. Things that if you made a sequel to, you would akin them similar to the aftermath in Batman v Superman and Captain America Civil War. Things like that, they sort of need to be touched on. You can't just have a quick sex joke and then just move on without addressing any of it. One of the biggest questions is George held responsible for his actions? Because in just after George grows, he escapes the gorilla enclosure and makes it to the bear enclosure where he kills a grizzly. And Dwayne Johnson mentions that if they report this, he'll be put down, and they don't want that to happen. But he's obviously now a gigantic monkey, so there isn't really a place for them to hide him. Is he held responsible for killing so many people, for eating the CEO of a company, albeit a corrupt company, but a company very nonetheless? Is Davis and Dr. Kate Caldwell, are they held responsible for setting up the murder of said CEO? I'm putting way too much thought into it, probably more thought than there was into the ending of the script, but still a lot of thought into this. And I'd also like to ask, what happened to the rest of the canisters on that space station? Because there was more than 3, and I believe only 3 made it into the pod before she decided to leave. They did say that the pods could withstand re-entry, so it's not that far to assume that it got blown up and then blasted into the water, or that it was just blown up and left in space. Apparently in one of the sequels it's aliens at some point, so there could be aliens in the movies somehow, and they've left an avenue open for sequels. But it's going to be, I'm genuinely wondering what happened to them. That's got to be a plot device in the sequel somehow. But I'd say that's the problem with Rampage's ending. It's just the ending. There's no solid wrap up to all the plots. There's no huge speech. It is just them there in Chicago walking. The biggest hint we get to answering any of those questions is, are people willing to accept George? And we get a hint of that. Some people got out of a building and George let them down on his hand. It seems like people are ready to accept him, but I'm not really sure, because those are just 2 people. And you can't really answer any of those questions with solid evidence without having a sequel. So it sets itself up for a sequel in many ways. I did find some form of symbolism in Rampage, and by symbolism I mean stretched very thin. I doubt there's any huge meaning to it beyond references to video games and setting up for sequels. For some reason there's a huge emphasis over this rat in a cage that the Wyden siblings have, and Claire usually takes care of it, similar to how she takes care of a lot of the situations and problems that Energene Corporation faces. So at the end of the movie, when she gives the rat in the cage to Brett, he's got to deal with the situation, and Claire ends up dying without the rat in a cage. It's a real stretch, but I can back it up further by saying that Brett dies after he hands off the rat in the cage to Russell. And the idea of the rat in the cage representing the control of the situation. They both seem to possess it when they're in some form of control throughout the entirety of the movie, but when they give up that power, or the rat in the cage, they ultimately die. I also think there's a message about drugs, about talking about whether it can be good and whether it can be bad. I don't have anything more to add to that. It's just, sometimes there's drugs that are good for you and they can improve you, and sometimes there's drugs that only make you worse, and I think that's all that really is to that message. But there could be more. I haven't seen it a second time. And I think in the movie there's a heavy emphasis over family, and that family makes the individual stronger. And that's emphasized by, George having a family and him having to protect them. He protects Davis throughout the movie. He protects humanity throughout the movie. Whereas Lizzie is a crocodile. You see her just alone when she is nearby the canister. And we see Ralph. He kills his entire pack. So the rejection of both family from Ralph and Lizzie is vastly different to George actually embracing family. And it's that family makes you stronger and you're able to overcome those who just live by themselves. So it's more of a family over loneliness sort of message in the end. But the problem with looking at a message like that is that one could easily misinterpret it as cultured versus uncultured, because George has been brought up by in America. He's learned no sign language, he's able to communicate with humans. And then you look at, Lizzie, a crocodile that's alone, cannot communicate, and I'll be honest, it really depends on how you want to look at it. If this is more of a message of you choose to look at it sort of thing, not as a way you can interpret it, off the bat sort of way. But I really don't think that's the message. I just think it's an interesting twist on the family versus loneliness sort of thing, using the same evidence. And quite blatantly, this movie also has a strong advocacy for animal safety. There's mentions of vegan, shampoo or deodorant, I can't remember what it was. And also the main trio of characters, they really like animals. Even so much to the part that Russell, sort of saves the rat from being squashed to death. As well as there being a couple conversations about why poaching is bad, your standard stuff about animal safety, and that's a good thing. That's a very good message to promote. I don't think there's many other posters up here that are promoting that same message. You'd think Jurassic World would do that. I'm pretty sure that was what they're going to promote. But everything else up here, no, I don't have that. As for Rampage, this is a movie I've clearly thought way too much about. Way too much about. I should be doing something productive. And instead I'm doing this. And I think it's a good idea to make a video about it. So I hope you enjoyed. Like the video if you enjoyed it. And subscribe to come on to the Platter Part. And of course, I will see you guys later. Bye. Well done, you made it to the end of the video. Why don't you click on one of these two videos for more content, or subscribe so just to be reminded of when I upload. Also, I've got a Facebook link. I don't have an external link to that because you've got to be part of YouTube's partner program for that. And I don't have enough subscribers or watch time to be part of the YouTube partner program. So, subscribe. That'd be great.